Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Today is the regular monthly meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 19th. We are at Vets Hall. This is the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, and we will welcome everybody. We have a quorum present, 2 members currently absent, Dave Batant and Lois Johnson. We'll start with a moment of silence, followed by the pledge. All right, let's rise for the pledge, please. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Any committee member announcements? Seeing none, I will open it for public comment for anything not on the agenda or for which is on the agenda and you cannot stay. Seeing none, close public comment. All right. We will begin with item A1, which is the consent calendar. That would be the approval of the minutes from the last month's meeting held on October 15th, 2019. This is a receive and file. Was there any updates, corrections, questions, or comments on those minutes? All right, go ahead, Bill.
Get it up.
It's on the bottom, the middle, yeah.
Yeah, just a minor comment. We recommended 2 changes be made to the quarterly report before that it's delivered to the City Council. Those changes were not made, which that's all right. I guess our recommendations don't get adhered to, even by Corolla. So there were nits, but yet the whole premise is that they just had a bunch of NAs for things that we said, let's put the real dates down. And the report the City Council received didn't have those changes. Other than that, I move that we accept the minutes.
Okay, so that was in item B2, the review of the WRF Capital Project quarterly update where we were talking about some of those. Yes, I do recall that discussion. Jennifer, do you think that got communicated or?
I know we added the recommendations, I think verbatim, into the staff report. I'm not sure about the actual attachment to the staff report.
As I recall, he was going to change the future report. That quarterly report was going to remain because it was already done, and he was going to change future editions.
That's true. That was some of what we discussed.
Well, at least the wording and what I had transmitted was corrected before it gets delivered to the City Council, which would be very easy because they had the dates. It just was a matter of inserting the dates. So it wasn't for future reports.
So that's okay. Duly noted. For future reference, then let's make a note, and if you will, and let's make sure that's on the next quarterly report, which would be next month or January, whenever we have the WRF on our agenda.
Yeah, you'll have one in January.
January. Okay. No change. Okay, thank you, Bill. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the motion on consent item A1 on the minutes is carries 5-0. Okay, very good. That will bring us to item B1, which is the fiscal year 2019-20 budget update and status report. And that report, thank you, Jennifer, that's included in there. Thank you for answering all those detailed questions several of us had. Do you have any preliminary comments or summary on that item, Jennifer?
No, I think the report's pretty comprehensive. We only have 1 or 2 adjustments that we're recommending at this point, and they're to our Economic Development Fund to account for the PG&E settlement or the Diablo settlement closure funds. There was 1 question that came in later this afternoon regarding property tax. I think it's on page, let's see, 7 of the attachment. And the comment being that the language above says that property tax is trending consistent with prior years when it's actually higher. So we'll make that correction before distributing this to council.
So that 115,000 was just some property tax that came in ahead of time. I assume the majority of them don't come in, obviously, when they're not paid till December.
Yep, that specifically, $110,000 of that was the unsecured property tax.
Okay.
I've sent an email to the county to ask if there's a reason why it came in first quarter versus second quarter when it typically comes in. I haven't received a response back yet, but we're following up on that. It's about 40,000 more than was anticipated for unsecured, so we may do an adjustment in the second quarter when we get those results in.
Okay, and just for those watching that can you just give us a real quick summary of the unsecured property tax? That's not your typical single-family homeowners paying taxes secured on a lien or whatever. Sorry to put you on the spot on that.
I just want to be consistent with how we've defined it, because we have the definitions in our policy, so I don't want to, or in our budget, I don't want to create any confusion if I use the wrong or different terminology.
I guess I should know.
Oh, I guess I didn't define it in here, so I can.
No worries.
Okay.
If you find it later. Okay. All right, so thank you. So that's item B1. Do we have any comments or questions? Thank you, those of you that sent them in ahead of time and all that. I think I understood all the answers, but if there's anything anybody wants to elaborate on or question? Bart, go ahead.
Just to make sure, the legal costs, although I guess it's trivial, the $1,600, so basically, legal costs are there and recorded into whatever the account is, 6101 or whatever it is. But your answer, these costs are tracked under separate, let's see, with the project, they're included over the project, but those who have not been included.
Yes,
So what, I understand that something that you don't know about, you can't record, obviously. But is there something that's been recorded that is not here?
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit, because then maybe I wasn't clear. This wharf project, if you had the full account string for it, falls in our sewer capital fund, which is 922, and it has a project code of 8312. And that's what all of these expenditures are hitting under that. So it would be 922, 8312, 5114, for example, and that would be lab testing for the wharf project. We've set up another project code, 8332? 8326, that is tracking litigation costs outside of this project. And those are the costs that we would not have been able to anticipate to budget for. That $1,600 in legal fees falls in that separate counting form. So we can add that onto here and just clarify, is it a separate project, so that it's all in one spot for you.
Okay, so they're not going to be part of the wharf cost at the end?
They're part of the wharf cost. We just thought it was important to track those separately, but they're not included in this. There's two wharf projects, if you will. The regular one that we all know about, the big, main construction of the facility, and that's what's shown on page 24.
922, or 920, whichever one that was.
8312. And then there's 922, 8312.
Okay.
And then there is a second project that is just tracking those unanticipated litigation costs. It's minimal. I think last year it was $1,800. So far this year there was $1,600 in legal fees and maybe a couple thousand in staff time for some of the document reviews from the litigation hold that we have.
I understand what you're trying to do. I'm just not understanding why it's not included. It's why, if it's going to ultimately be part of the wharf, then why aren't you putting it as part of the wharf going forward?
I think your point is to have it included so you see it all, is what you're trying to. So
if you're saying that it's part of the project, it ought to be reflected as a cost to the project.
we'll include a line item in here to capture it so that it's all disclosed on the page.
I don't know that you need another line item for $3,000, but
When we charge an invoice.
I'm not arguing against what you're trying to do. That's fine. But I think the cost ought to be there.
Yeah, and I think that would be the simplest way to show it, is because I can't break out a legal fee. I charge it to legal, and I can't break out if it's regular wharf or litigation wharf, because we don't have two legal lines. So we'll just put another wharf litigation line item here, and you'll be able to see those costs.
We'll rely on your judgment as to the best way
And
to
just
present. Thanks.
to
Go
make
ahead.
sure, because we had a discussion earlier, as best I can understand it, and it makes sense, that all wharf costs, water and sewer, are all in one bucket. When you get to the end of the project, you will, through estimating techniques, split out the amount that would go to water and the amount that would go to sewer. But you're not doing anything as you go along relative to trying to track water versus sewer at this point, which is fine. I just want to
Yep,
make.
that's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, just a nit on page 14, just the last column is titled FY 18-19. It should be FY 19-20, but that's, someone ever looks at it. Then on page 24, which is the wharf project, I guess this is the budget, but yet, I guess the first question is, prior year actuals of $5.54 million. Now, there's no way that number can be any different from that. That's a question, and because the reason is when working with Eric and Corolla, they claimed that the prior costs of $3.908 million. It's a $1.6 million difference, and it's significant when you start looking at the total program cost of $126 million. So is it up to interpretation what prior year costs are? I would think.
This is what we've tracked in our spreadsheets and systems, so if I'm hearing it's different from what Carollo has, then I would have to guess our measure point is different. We're starting from March 2013, and I'll have to confirm when he's starting from.
But they only started, 2018, so why wouldn't they just accept your costs? I don't quite understand why.
I can't answer that today. I'll have to talk to Carollo and see what the difference is and get back to
You
you.
could do that. I'd appreciate that.
Bill, just as a point, all my participation in the WRF-CAC meetings and everything, it's always been that like 5.3, 5.4. I've never seen it deviated. So they're tracking something different. It may not have all the categories or whatever. She can follow up on that, but it's not 3.9, in my opinion.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
It might be helpful to maybe put a footnote or something on that indicated that it was from January 2013 through X, because I remember looking at the check register run, and even though Eric was on board for the fourth quarter of 2018, the last check or the check run, or maybe the one just before that, there was a $125,000 check to MKN, indicating that he was still doing something in the fourth quarter of 2018. So I think some of the differences, what we're talking about is there's two contracts in place at the same time.
Yeah, we can certainly denote the time frame on here, and we can either do it at the bottom of the page, or if it makes sense to do prior years, is March 13 through 6/30/18, and then you have 18-19 forward. But we'll make it clear what time period this is.
I think, I agree with the concept, but I think you said it's not really 2013, because for whatever reason you've determined that 2013, it was small costs, but those are not going to be captured in what we're going to call the WRF capital costs, as I understood from a previous meeting. Is that correct? Somebody's made a decision that where you start is like the end of 2013 or end of 14 or something like that.
So from a project tracking standpoint in our system, the city started tracking us as a project in 2013. We are not able to submit, and maybe this is what you're referring to, we aren't able to submit for reimbursement under the SRF planning loan for anything prior to, I think it's forget which month, but it's 2015. The planning loan is not eligible, costs are not eligible for submission for reimbursement from 2015.
Okay. Thank you. I did not understand that. You probably said that. I didn't.
It gets complicated. I keep having to refer back
Okay,
to the dates to
since
make
there's
sure.
30 million being taken out of monies captured, then that 20,000 can go from that.
It might be helpful that an addendum page to this budget might include some footnotes. I mean, we just mentioned one, and I'm sure that others will come up with more, and you'll fill a page up pretty fast. May save some time answering questions.
So I heard the footnote on the time period that this covers, and then we're going to also add the litigation costs so that that's in here. We'll confirm if there's anything to add of why why the Curler report is different. Those are the only three I've heard so far.
Correct. John, anything?
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you for being so responsive with your answers to our questions. Also, on the Diablo Settlement Fund money, the city is going to be getting, I think you said, up to about $1 million in total?
It's 960, I believe, 900 and something.
Okay, is there any possibility, based on this Senate Bill 1090, that if they don't actually close Diablo, the city will have to pay that money back?
I think that's a good question. I have not heard that. I will, now that you've asked that, confirm that. There hasn't been any indication of that in any of the documents we received. They've talked about how we need to report out on use of the funds and what the funds can be used for in terms of economic development. We haven't heard any, I haven't heard of any kind of payback if it doesn't close.
Okay, but it's just going to sit in a fund for a while, right?
Well, council,
Until the council decides.
council has to appropriate it for use. It is meant for economic development, type things to make up for the losses. So I think we, as staff, need to identify an appropriate use for that to make a recommendation to council. And I'm not sure, we haven't had those conversations yet internally.
Okay. And then I noticed that water sales revenue was actually below budget for the fiscal year that ended. And also for the first quarter, it's less than last year, first quarter. Have you seen a big reduction in water sales as a result of the higher prices? And is that something that, is a concern to you?
We've been, tracking pretty closely with the wharf and surcharge and how those are coming in. There's a couple of factors that play into effect here. Basically, people are being more conservative, I think, with their water usage given the higher rates. Not that this has a huge impact, but we're reaching out more with our utility discount program, so that makes up for it, but we don't do that until the end of the year, so you won't see that offset, that 10% come back into the fund until the end of the year. But otherwise, depending on the weather, if we have a dry year, we might have a lot of usage this winter for irrigation and that type of thing.
Thanks, John. Go ahead, Homer. Anything?
No, just thank you for your responses to the questions I had.
And just on that note, there were quite a few questions. I think there's been concern about how those are shared with the council in the past. When we send this to council in December, the quarterly budget report will be an attachment to the staff report, and then we'll do a second attachment with your questions. So that way it's part of the public record and available for council to review.
That way they see our questions, and more importantly, they see the answers, and you don't have to go through this again, basically.
Correct.
Okay. And then I had a question before I open up for public comment on Measure Q. I noticed, and this is consistent over the last 3 years, it looks like it's been going up almost 8% a year. This is on page 18 of your report, the quarterly budget report. And then this year we had it down a little bit, about 10%, projected at 1.1 million. Is that just based on the, HDL info, or?
Yeah,
I didn't
so-
see any indication that, revenues are going down.
HDL had, and I think we might have talked about this a little bit at budget time, they had projected a slowing down of the economy. We developed the budget off of their estimates, and then, about a week before we adopted, came back with new estimates, and they were even lower. They were expecting that the economy was really going to slow down. I did provide you with the most recent summary of the update that we got about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw
They
that.
do not provide us with new budget estimates until our next quarterly meeting, so I don't have anything to share with you in terms of budget adjustments, but they are saying that the growth is higher than they thought at this point.
Okay.
So we'll get through the next quarter and see how it is, and then maybe have some adjustments.
That's right. It's probably better to be conservative. I've just kind of noticed that. And actually, there's been some of these projections over the last couple of years, even when management partners looked at some of our stuff. So I'm glad to see it's not quite coming into fruition with the original projections.
Don't forget that Measure Q, unlike our regular city sales tax, includes automobile sales for all folks that, regardless of where they buy a car, when they register it in Morro Bay, the district transaction tax gets the 0.5%. And as we all know, the auto industry's had a very, very strong 3 years.
That's a good point. Very good point, yeah.
Interesting on that, our representative from HDL commented specifically on car sales, and that is one segment of the industry they're starting to see slow down quite significantly, and their thought on that is everybody's bought their new cars because there were so many sales in the last few years. Everybody has a new car and they don't need another new car, was his comment.
It's a good point. The sales tax, it can be a little more a smoothing effect, if you will, on the curve. And you're right, there was a lot of pent-up demand, and then a lot of people bought, and that's not something that's replaced every 3 years, typically. So, okay, good comments.
Could I make one more comment?
Yes, please, John.
Jennifer, on pages 11 and 12, you have an extended discussion about the salaries and benefits and the impact of the annual upfront payment to CalPERS for the unfunded accrued liability. I'm very glad to see you put that in there, because that's material to what's happening with the budget, and it's good that you explained it. It made it much clearer in my mind. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
No, that's good. You're right. That's a very good point. And the savings that we got from that was good. So I'll open up to public comment on this item. Please step forward. State your name optionally.
Thank you, Barry Brandon, citizen of Morro Bay. Mr. Martin, you stole my thunder, so to speak, on the water. The recent adjacent community, Cayucas, when they budgeted their project, they had an understanding of what the flow was going to be through their plant. And now the plant's build and their amount of flow that's going through their plant is about half of what they designed for. My point being is the water receipts, even though we have a higher rate, I think you're going to find that your revenue from water is going to be substantially less because people are cutting back and they're seeing the numbers. And I think that will affect the revenue projections for the water income for this year, and you're seeing a little bit of it now, but it's a major realization. People are pulling out their yards and so on. So this is going to be, I think, a major impact into the revenue. Now, the sewer fee is fixed, but the water revenue is not fixed, and it's variable. And I think you're going to have a major impact in the water revenue because it's hitting people hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Question. I didn't understand Cayucas. They're not done, so what?
Yes, Cayucas, over the last number of years, they designed a plant over there. And when they did all of the preliminary design of the throughput through the plant, they figured how much volume was going to be. And so they have 4 water providers in the Cayucas facility. I said Cayucas, I meant Los Osos. Please excuse me. We're talking about Los Osos.
Okay.
Thank you for catching me. No, it's Los Osos. So Los Osos has 4 water purveyors. Those water purveyors, their revenues really tanked. The throughput through the Los Osos plant is half of what it was designed for. So their revenues for all those water purveyors, I happen to be associated with that water organization over there. And so you're going to see a tremendous revenue. I don't know if it's tremendous, but you're going to be substantial. And there was almost 50% reduction in the water use by the people. So if you can put that in your program and expect some kind of a major reduction in your water use, then your water revenue is going to be in. Pardon me for misstating, and thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Well stated. All right. Any other comments on item B1? All right, we'll close that. And before I move on, I meant to mention something at the beginning. Our CFAC representative, City Council, Marlis McPherson, as you see, is not here today. She's on travel out of state. She did talk to me, and she is or will be watching this live, our meeting, so just so we know that. And she also indicated she had to leave the last meeting a little bit early for another conflict, and that she did watch the end of that meeting as well. So she's reviewing all our meetings and that, even when she's not here in person. So just wanted to clarify that. All right, that takes us to...
If I can just ask then, I'll make the changes that were pointed out in the questions, the items that we talked about today, and then I can share with the council that the committee accepted the report.
Yes, we are in agreement, except it's a receive and accept, yes.
Okay, just so I understand, because it seemed like there were more numbers that weren't the same as what I see in the budget, but numbers stay, other than you're correcting some things, but numbers that are in the budget, other than amendments, that's it. That's the only thing, only reason that column would change. It's whatever was approved. So if we go online and put in the search city budget, add amendments to that, that's it.
Correct. And I think you've asked for this, and I'm sorry, I recall when we have these conversations about adding an amendment column, so you can see adopted, amended, and then it would be adjusted budget as well.
Well, if there's only a few amendments, I don't know that we need another column for that. What I was talking about, as long as it's that few limited amendments, I think that's okay. I was concerned that there was all kinds of changes all around, and obviously you're going to be right at the end because you change everything to make it to be right.
Right.
So, but if it's just a couple amendments, we don't need another column for a few adjustments.
Yeah, typically by this time of the year we don't have very many, right? Because we just adopted a budget, so we shouldn't have too many. By the time we get into mid-year, though, you start to get a better look at how the year is progressing, because we do mid-year and end of January, February. So at that point, we might have a large number of amendments. But
what can trigger an amendment?
Well, we just did one recently, for example, with the fire department. It affected the whole city for the public safety power shutoff, something that we weren't aware of when we adopted the budget. There's a need for some supplies to be prepared for that if it happens. For instance, if the power is shut off, we're not going to be able to get gas for our vehicles. Doesn't matter for some of our city vehicles, but police needs gas, fire needs gas. Our utilities department vehicles would need gas if there's any issues with water. So if we needed to buy a fuel tank, so that, for example.
Then I go back to where I was. That's adjusting the budget to make it match things that change. Things happen as you go through, and you make a budget, you make your best shot at it. Things happen as you go through, so the actual costs at the end, and you may forecast as you go along, but if we keep changing the budget to adjust for unknowns when you made the budget, then, I don't know, I just have a problem. So I guess I am back to where I would like to have the amendments there.
I think what maybe we should try and see if it works for you is to have the adopted budget, a column for adjustments, and then an amended budget column.
Yeah, the column for adjustments would be the sum, a cumulative sum of all the adjustments to date. That would make sense, and then the amended would be the summation of the previous two. Okay.
Well, with regards to the wharf, what is the plan, Jennifer, for that? Will that budget stay as is unless there are amendments, and what would cause an amendment to the budget? Or will we wait till June and then develop the 2020-21 budget?
So typically, if we talk about the general fund, for example, if in the finance department, I had a staff person out for whatever reason and have some, or leave, and I have salary savings, I might have offsetting increased temporary help, or part-time help, because I had to backfill that a little bit. I wouldn't do a budget adjustment between those two line items. So if you apply that same methodology to the wharf, if they're under budget in one line item but higher in another line item, in a regular scenario, we wouldn't necessarily do a transfer between those two. However, the wharf, I think, is a little bit different, and when we're going to do transfers like that, we would probably need to bring them forward for transparency purposes. So we're working on the best way to do that. We're not trying to be, deceptive in where any of the expenditures are. So however we can communicate that in the most transparent way, we need to figure that out.
Since you brought up the wharf and used the term budget, Carollo uses the term budget. I would propose or suggest that you get with Eric and have him use different terminologies, base estimate, forecast, something, so that the term budget is literally your budget. So what's called a budget is
City budget.
city budget. Whatever other number that Carollo wants to estimate, which is appropriate, but the term budget, so we all know that when you see budget, that means the city budget. Now, that will probably cause you to have to get together with Eric to reconcile the two numbers, but I think the term budget ought to clearly be the city budget.
All right.
That's a great point. I totally agree. Should we make a motion that the city council direct Carollo to do that? Or the likelihood that some change is going to happen just from our discussion is probably zero, I would think.
So this is our first quarter report. That's what you're making motions on at this point. I think you had planned on bringing up a future agenda item that it probably falls under, based on our conversation earlier
Yeah, no,
in the week.
I'm not ready to do that. You're flying off the handle right now. Let's evaluate and do what we need to do. Okay, so this is the first quarter budget, general fund, and everything else, the other two that reported, Measure Q and the fund. So we ready to move to item B2? This was a receive and file, we agreed. And Jennifer did agree to take our comments and include it in the report to staff. So that takes us to the investment report, item B2, the first quarter investment report from the city for this, for the fiscal year, 2019, 2020. And I think your brief report summarizes it very well. It's adequate. I didn't have any questions. I don't know if anybody else, I didn't see too many other questions on it, but any comments on that?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but how are you doing on the reimbursement on the planning loan?
We have submitted a second reimbursement for $6.4 million, which we expect to have, or have been told we'll have the check for by the end of the year, calendar year. We have about $4 million-ish left to reimburse that I have started to compile and hope to have in by the end of the week.
That's terrific. The only reason I mention that is that 2% of $10 million is 200 grand.
Yep, absolutely.
You know,
So we worked hard to get that $6.4 million. It was quite a substantial packet that we sent to the state for reimbursement, and they called to confirm that they received it and expected that we'd have a check by the end of the year.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks. Great question, Homer. Okay, and that's pretty close to what the LAIF is, so, I don't think there's any suggestions or anything we have there, the weighted average. Receive and file. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I don't, for the city council, you might want to mention that you put a sentence in about the reimbursement. I mean, I would think that they'd want to know. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but we can do that. And hopefully by then I can add that the $4 million is also in.
That'd be even
I should
better.
be able to,
That
'cause
might even
that's
change the
December.
weighted average for even for 1 month or
Well, they
1
might
week.
actually look at this and
They
understand it,
should,
maybe.
yes. Yeah, I know we do. Okay. So receive and file, again on item B2. Thank you. All right, that takes us to item B3, the fiscal year audited and annual report for the CAFR report. And I think you said last time the auditors were coming in a few weeks, a couple weeks or so. Are they in now?
Yeah, so let me maybe open this
Give
by
us an
giving a
update?
little bit of
Okay.
an update. And Sandy's here too. So first of all, Sandy did a great job. She, leads up kind of the audit work. The auditors were here for a week, had a very short list of things to finish up when they left field work, and so we were happy about that. They've preliminarily said that the last audit finding will be closed out and there's no new audit findings, so that's what we're expecting, unless something changes between now and then. We expect to have a final copy, a draft copy of the CAFR by December 2nd, I believe is the date, and then we have committed to turning that around. Let me pull up my calendar here so I give you the right dates. A full draft copy of the CAFR on the 2nd, and we've committed to returning that by the 6th. So that gives us a week to go through that. We're expecting to get preliminary draft fund statements this week that we can start kind of ticking and talking those off as well. So this conversation, in addition to you asking for the budget performance report, was to kind of talk about how you would like to review the draft CAFR this year. In the past, the committee has not been given that much time to review it. Perhaps we can discuss setting up a subcommittee of this committee, and as soon as we have a draft, we could issue it to that subcommittee. That way there aren't Brown Act issues with that, and give you more of a chance to review it with the understanding that we're probably still reviewing internally as well. But that might give you some more time if you'd like to do that. And coincidentally enough, I know we've already talked about this, but this just came today, so I figured it was timely to bring it. This is our CAFR award from last year.
From last year, all right.
So it's pretty neat, and then each year as we get them, you get these little medallions to go along the side, so it's very clear that 2018 was the first year we got this. So, kudos to Sandy and the rest of the team for getting that done. And if we can figure out how to hold it on the wall, because it's pretty heavy, we will put that up in city. Go ahead. You take it up. Sure. And also, thanks to the committee, because you guys did review that CAFR and helped in many years with providing feedback. So since it came today, we thought it was a good idea to bring it and show it.
That's wonderful. Congratulations to you, Sandy, and the entire finance team. Appreciate that. Wow, that is heavy. It must be real.
Jennifer, it's the same auditor, same auditing firm as prior years?
Yes, the Poon Group.
Okay, and are you going to have to rotate them sometime soon? Or are you going to be sending out requests for proposals?
Their contract was able to extend for 5 years. Do we have
right?
one more year left on that, or is this our last year? So we'll have to be issuing an RFP to solicit new bids. They're, of course, welcome to submit a proposal under that and be evaluated.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, I would like to just comment that is a team effort. That award is for the finance department, and it starts, at the very beginning for somebody accepting a payment off for a water and sewer payment, and recording it correctly, to balancing the cash, to making sure all the revenue gets recorded correctly, everybody pay, the accounts payable is processed correctly. We are decentralized in our accounts payable process, so we have trained many people across the organization to know how to submit those invoices and code them correctly and put them in the right year, as well as all of our year-end accruals. We do 54 adjustments at the end of the year to convert us from modified cash basis of accounting to full accrual. And then we have 101 audit work papers that are prepared to support all the documentation that the auditors need, so they can walk in here and be done in a week. So it is quite an effort, and it takes a full team to do that. So I wanted to acknowledge all the people that make those contributions.
Very well done. Thank you. Excellent. That's and that's the second award, right? We also have gotten from the City, the finance.
Yeah, so that was our first CAFR award. We received the budget award from CSMFO, California Societies of Municipal Finance Officers. And then for this year, we submitted our budget to CSMFO and GFOA. We'll get comments back from GFOA. I'm not quite sure if we've met all the criteria yet on that or not, but if not, we'll get good feedback. And actually, by the end of next week, Sandy and I both have to review other agency budgets as part of the process for that. So CSMFO is kind of a peer review of those budgets to see if they meet the criteria, and she and I both have budgets to submit our review of. So we'll find out hopefully soon on both of those.
Okay, great, thank you. Job well
Excellent
done.
work. If you can get your marketing department to have some way to put it on next door to Stereo News would be good, so there's something other than the WRF that gets publicized. I don't know how that's done or how you would do it, but it certainly,
I'm on there. I'll take a picture of that and post it. I've
I think
posted
it would
before on
be,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
She's on it.
Yeah.
That's great. Yes, the city isn't allowed to or does not
Yeah,
post on
right.
Nextdoor unless it's a public emergency, like a street closure or something like that, because that's really a citizen's tool for communication, so we try not to interfere with that. And again, unless it's some kind of notification. So
But
if our
Barbara can
chair,
post.
that would be great.
Yeah.
And a Stereo News, I mean, isn't that something that you could let them know?
Yeah, the city manager did do a press release, but we can revisit that from when we originally got the announcement. I think it's a little more impressive to see the actual awards, so maybe we can do something follow
And
up on
have
that.
your team, be great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right, so that brings us, thank you for that. Where are we? Item, I think it was B3? Oh, no, that was B3. Okay, so now we're on item C.
No.
No?
We're still on B3 for the detailed.
Oh, I'm sorry, the detailed budget
Budget
performance
performance
report.
report.
You're right,
Yeah.
yes. I didn't print that one off because it was too big. Okay, so on the budget performance report, and there were some questions on that, I believe, that were also addressed. What do we have for that? Does anybody have any comments, or? Go ahead, Homer, you want to start?
Congratulations on a surplus. This was probably changed by Colonel Buckingham, but there used to be a policy in place that surpluses automatically transferred to the emergency reserves. And I'm curious, is that policy still in place?
Surpluses do transfer to the emergency reserves, although we have set fund balance policies for all of our facility or vehicle replacement funds, and we've set target and minimum funding levels, so we will do an analysis of what those levels are at and then make recommendations on where to transfer to at least get up to the minimum funding levels.
What happened to last year's $750,000?
Last year's transfer into, this is quite complicated, and Sandy and I went back and forth on this quite a bit, because we transferred $38,000 into the general fund emergency reserve last year. There was an adjustment for that, and that's because that was the cash in the fund as of the end of the year. So there's still fund balance that sits in the 001, and we only transfer the cash amount. When the auditors do their audit, they roll up multiple funds into the general fund. So it's 001, 050, 053, I think. There's several different funds that roll up and capture all of that as general fund emergency reserves, essentially.
I didn't understand any of that, but that's okay.
Okay.
I didn't either.
Maybe I'll ask this differently. Is the amount in the emergency reserves increasing?
Yes.
Well, that's a good news, and that's the right direction. Okay, John or Homer, did you have?
Yeah, but she answered all the rest of them in my email, which I know is you.
I guess you raise a good point, or just a question, say, for the WRF. There's so much budgeted this year, that's the plan, certainly because of the delay. it's very likely we're not going to spend nearly that amount. So that money that's left over, I would think, what happens to that this year?
So that goes back to Mr. Beckman's comments earlier. The wharf project is funded from the water accumulation fund and the sewer accumulation fund.
So
we
it
do
just
not
stays in the accumulation
we do not
fund. It
transfer
doesn't
any
go to,
money to
okay.
fund that project until year end when we have final project amounts.
Just like all the enterprise
Yeah.
funds, they can't be.
Well, Homer's comments are pertaining to the general fund. Right, got it, thank you.
Well, and the only problem I see with transferring all the money to the reserve fund at the end of the fiscal year is that there's no recognition of the cash flow needs of the underlying funds after that. So, for example, the harbor fund, you end up with this big chunk of money in the accumulation fund, and then during the year, the harbor fund goes negative cash. And to me, that just doesn't make much sense, because especially when you have to do things like calculate interest earnings to the various funds, that kind of negative cash situation just wreaks havoc with those types of things. So I don't know what you do about that, but I think that's something that the funds should keep enough fund to operate on during the year. I am going to make one pick with you, Jennifer. I asked about this interest income on the undistributed on the first page of the detail report. It's in the general fund. And it's account 3710 is interest income, which if you turn the page, there's another entry for account 3710 under Department
That's our
Accounting and Treasury. So you got two entries for interest income under the same fund. And I'm thinking probably you should have consolidated both of them under the second one, because
no.
the first one actually had no revenue for the prior year, so I'm thinking that shouldn't just stay there.
So, actually, just to clarify that, because they are two different things, the interest income under the undistributed is the interest we earn on the cash in the fund throughout the year. The interest under Department 3510, that's our note receivable interest on the Coral Ave property that stays in the general fund. So to maybe reiterate that, everything under the 1111 is recorded there during the year and then distributed out among all the funds. Everything under 3510 is just general fund.
Okay, so for the general fund's portion of the pooled cash balance, the interest on that money that the city gets, where does that go?
Yeah, that's in the 111-3710.
Okay, so the general fund, this is not including the accumulation fund. Is there interest posted to the accumulation fund separate?
General
from
fund
this?
emergency reserve, yes.
Emergency reserve? Okay, all right. Okay, so that makes sense. I was just thinking that that's a very small amount of interest earnings for the amount of money that the general fund actually has. So that interest that the general fund earns is being posted to the emergency reserve fund?
Yeah, if you look on page 30 of the same report, you'll see at the bottom or mid three-quarters of the way down starts the 051 fund, the general fund emergency reserve, and you will see the same 3710 under the undistributed department of $56,000. And that's the amount. And keep in mind, and this goes back to your point about negative cash balances, the interest is allocated at the end of the year based on the cash balance of the year, right? The average cash balance.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the budget performance report?
Thank you for including it. There, I realize it looks like a lot of stuff, but there is some pretty interesting information in there. One of the things, for instance, that I noticed was in the capital projects section, other than the big capital projects or the capital projects that were like buying a fire engine, there was an awful lot of capital projects that nothing happened. And that was a little disappointing, actually. I realize that you can't answer that because you're not, trying to figure out how to fix the Morrill Creek, issue, but I just thought I'd mention that, that it is something that the value of that report is that it really does show that kind of thing.
It is pretty clear when you see this report, and then we're adding. We've tried to, in the last couple of years, do capital project updates with our mid-year report, where Rob will write an update on each of his capital projects. Harbor would do the same for theirs, whoever's lead on those. And that's a good point, or that's a good time period to ask about, the status or the progress and where we're at and expect to end the year in.
That's a good point. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Homer, for bringing that up. Include that. All right, any other comments? All right. Go ahead, John.
In regards to Jennifer's suggestion that you appoint a subcommittee for the CAFR review, do you want to do that?
What's everybody's thoughts, and would somebody like to serve on that as well? We'd very much appreciate your participation because you've done this professionally before. Who else would like to work with John and assist him?
Now, what's the purpose of the subcommittee?
Well, Jennifer's up against a December 31st deadline to get the CAFR submitted to the GFOA for this award. And so the auditors are barely going to get it done before our next meeting, and then it has to immediately go to council so they can approve it, so then she can mail it off to the GFOA. So we have like days to take a look at it.
I think you had a long weekend, essentially, last time.
And we have given them comments before, just from an outsider, I'm not trying to do the job, but just based on our experience and what we think, and if that helps them, they can get those changes in if they agree.
The calendar doesn't permit that. Our next meeting is December 17th, and if I'm not mistaken, the City Council fourth meeting in December has traditionally been canceled.
Yeah, just to clarify, it does not go to council before it's submitted to GFOA.
Oh, it doesn't go to council.
The audit goes to council in typically January or February. We'll try for January just to close out that year, and because we're in budget at that point, we need to move on to the next year. But it does create, by the time we get final draft statements back from the auditors, to give you enough time as a whole committee to review it and provide comment and feedback back, and then for us to research, maybe depending on what those comments are. It's a tight crunch. I would just point out that the MD&A is ours. We provide that to the auditors, but otherwise this is the auditor's report. So some items we may be able to change and some items we may not. It's not entirely our city prerogative to change the audit work papers unless we've identified an area or an error that we need to correct.
Well, I think a subcommittee makes excellent sense. It's the only way you can meet the time constraints and then live within the Brown Act rather than having it on the agenda and having it sent out and get a response.
Exactly.
So, yes.
When do you anticipate you would get, the 10th?
So we're supposed to have our final full CAFR on the 2nd of December.
Okay.
And then we had committed to getting that back to them by the end of that week, which is the 6th, for the draft statements. And then the 13th received the final draft CAFR with the understanding that our meeting is on the 17th of December. So again, that would really be a long weekend review if you don't have a subcommittee looking at it in advance. And there isn't, without a subcommittee, there's no way for me to get the draft statements to you and be able to have any public comment on them.
I think it makes a lot of sense. What I'm not clear on is it sounds like we can just make this happen quickly, but when we discussed a subcommittee for the wharf project review, which is very similar in nature as far as looking into the details, it seemed like we needed God and country to sort of approve it and go back. So how is this different than, I can't remember exactly the details, but it's very similar in nature that there's a lot of detail, and somebody like John would be fantastic at,
John and I and others have done it before, so the precedent's been set.
I agree. I'm trying to understand what's different about this discussion.
The difference is one is ongoing and the other is a one-shot deal.
Well,
One shot for
I mean, you're gonna- yeah, you've gotta-
4 years.
No, I'm talking about the the audit is a 180-page document that's going to be approved or not approved, and that's it. It's not going to happen next month and next year and the year after. Does that make sense? Where
the other.
the WRF is an ongoing thing that'll be continuous. Does that make any sense?
The other difference is that we as staff are not directing you form the subcommittee. It's up to this committee if you want to do that. And that was the same with the wharf. So you need to have consensus or a vote on the committee if you want to establish this.
But Mr. Collins weighed in on the other one. He says, well, if you guys want to just get together, that's fine, but setting up a subcommittee is something he needs to weigh in on.
Okay, so I disagree. First of all, we're here to discuss, do we want to set up a subcommittee for the CAFR? We have done that previously. We have set up other subcommittees. Remember, we serve at the pleasure of council, and sometimes there's some things they don't want us spending our time on. This is not one of them. They've been very appreciative and commenting on what we do with the CAFR. So I don't have any a reservation, and I'll certainly run it by our liaison. Okay, but I don't, that is not an issue. And so rather than get into, well, why didn't we do it here and why didn't we do it there, let's focus on the CAFR because that's the agenda item and that's what we're here to help you with for now. So I would make a motion that, yes, we set up a subcommittee to assist finance staff, since they have requested review of the CAFR.
Could we, since John's been nice enough to volunteer, could we penalize the two that missed the meeting by forming?
Well,
No,
well, first
it's
of all,
kind of humor, but this is a major commitment of somebody.
well, let's first see if we even all want to make a subcommittee. I've made a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So now we're in agreement. We do want to make a committee. I've asked for volunteers. Go
Do you
ahead.
want to vote on that?
Oh, yes, we should have well, typically, don't we motion, approve, discuss, and then vote?
You can discuss, but the motion was to form or not, so you can have a discussion on that, but maybe not necessarily who's on it.
Okay, so the motion that we should, before we vote on is, should we form a subcommittee?
Yes, that was the motion.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Yes.
Bart? Okay, so that's 5-0. So yes, we would like to have a subcommittee. Now we can discuss the mechanics of it. We do have a person, I believe, that has graciously volunteered that has the expertise that could really assist us. Do we have any other, well, you made a suggestion, somebody's not here. I'm not willing to
Yeah, I would
appoint them.
recommend that number one, who was on the committee last year?
There was not a committee last year. It came to the whole board.
Yeah, the year before
For
it was
you, I, and John.
John and Barbara and I, yeah.
Yeah. John, who's no longer.
John Irwin.
On,
Irwin,
yeah, John
yeah.
Irwin, yes.
Do you want to reach out to, I mean, Lois is, a retired chief financial officer. She's looked at an awful lot of audits. Do you want to reach out to her and see if she's interested?
I would definitely like to do that. I was hoping we'd get maybe 2 volunteers from this crew, and then I could reach out to both Dave and Lois, see if either or both are interested.
And the dates were December.
December 2nd is when we're targeting to get the draft of the full CAFR.
And when do you need the comments back by?
We've committed internally to giving our comments back by that Friday. Probably could try to push it to Monday the 9th to give a weekend, understanding that this is what we'll do all day. And
So in other words, I don't have a calendar. What day
The
is?
2nd is a Monday, the
Second.
6th is a Friday, the 7th
Okay, so
and 8th would be the
you'd
weekend.
like this back from the subcommittee on Wednesday or Thursday, right? Comments?
Thursday at the latest, if we're going to return them back on Friday, because
Okay.
we'll have to research
Yeah,
anything,
okay.
or if it's not something we've identified in our review.
I'd volunteer, but I'm going to be missing a couple days in there.
Wait, Thursday, what, the 5th or the 12th? The 5th, okay.
I was thinking.
So this allows John to work directly with staff. You don't have, right? Which is good, but that's what it allows you to do. So you don't have to,
We normally just did it independently.
Okay.
We didn't have to work with staff.
Okay.
So,
but you have to give your comments to
yes,
staff.
back to them. Yes, yes.
But you can give them to directly, so you're not having to wait for us to get together.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Committee, just like we did on the budget in brief, and that committee goes off, meets, does some things, discusses it, brings it back, and then we vote on it. But in this case, they'll just go back.
That was my point. In that case, you brought it back here.
'Cause we
there
had
was
the time.
In this case, because it's a weekend or something, and John's going to give up his life for a weekend, I guess.
And Jennifer can do whatever she wants to
That's
with our
right.
comments.
We are
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah, but
yeah,
you're right,
yeah.
Bill. Bart, sorry. We are delegating authority to them and the responsibility to coordinate with staff because of the timeline on the feedback. So that means if you're not serving on a subcommittee and you disagree vehemently with whatever recommendation they make, not that that's ever happened on the CAFR, then too bad. I mean, you have to be realistic. If we're telling them to get back, we're authorizing them the authority to speak as a subcommittee of CFAC. Fine. So you said you would need you would get it to them on the Monday and need it back on the 5th, that Thursday, or the following Thursday?
The 5th would be the best, because that
Okay.
we'd be able to incorporate any of your comments into our review that we return back on the 6th.
She really wants it on the 3rd.
But I understand that's not practical.
We use corporate schedule. Okay, it's due on the 3rd. There'll be a delay to the 4th, and then we'll have it close of business.
And the reason it's such a turnaround is that's a week then before, the
research and-
13th, our packet for the next CFAC meeting will be
Okay.
going out.
Okay, so that's Monday through Thursday, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th of December. Does that still fit with your schedule, John? Okay, all right. Homer, you're not available. You would otherwise be interested to help. I'm not available. All right, I will reach out to Lois. You okay with a subcommittee of 1? Well, no. Okay.
Hey, but don't forget Dave.
I not only don't have the expertise probably, but I'm not going to be here
Okay.
the 4th, so.
We'll just have to inform Dave and Lois that that is the penalty for...
I'm not attending. Yeah. I will reach out and try to convince them both, if that's okay. We could have 3, but certainly one of them.
And then if you could just let me know who's
So you
if
know who
any
to
of them
send it
are
to.
going to join,
Yeah.
then we'll be in communication about the timing, because, these are tentative dates, so I expect they'll hold true, but if there's any changes, we'll be able to communicate those to the right people.
Okay, thank you. And just as a comment, if for any reason my schedule changes and I can assist and I can't get the other 2, is it okay with the rest of the people if I step in as a backup? Okay, if I can. All right, thank you. All right, so we have a motion approved and second and unanimously. We will have a subcommittee. We have 1 person signed up to be on that. I will reach out to the 2 absent members here, see if they are available, and revisit my schedule in case that changes. So, okay, thank you. And then I'll follow up, Jennifer. And Sandy, you want to be copied on that as well? Who's on the, okay. Thank you. All right, any other concluding comments or anything on item B3, the CAFR and the budget performance report? All right, if not, that brings, were you okay? Did you have, okay. That brings us to item C, future agenda items. And let's go over what we have next month anyways, just to, obviously it would be, for December we would be doing Measure Q, correct?
Yes, so Measure Q and Draft CAFR.
Draft CAFR, yes, okay. Based on our subcommittee comments and reports and feedback?
And Sandy's making a good clarification here, that's probably your entire meeting,
Oh, okay.
I would suspect.
December 17th, Tuesday here, 3:30, third Tuesday of December. So the draft.
Whatever approved are changing to 3 o'clock.
No, the council is reviewing the policies and the committees. I asked for an update on that yesterday, and it went from one member to, I think, the mayor. Somebody's reviewing. It's in process. It's in process. I haven't forgotten it, but yes. Okay, so we have those two items for future agenda items. Anybody have any suggestions?
Before we get to, I thought made a motion that we would review contract changes over $1 million.
That's also.
Did they say no to that?
They haven't responded to any of that, I don't think,
So,
to my knowledge. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
I'll
You have-
go back and refresh my memory, but I believe that was going to come back as part of the advisory handbook update and with that in the role of the committee, and that has not come back to council yet. But I'll go back and confirm if that was the case, and if not, when it's scheduled to come back.
I mean, they can say no.
It hasn't been heard by council yet.
As well, and in fact, I think a couple of things we submitted, it was alluded to that were accepted, so they're still, but they're in the process of review, so they haven't done the whole thing.
And the other one would be the 3 o'clock meeting start time. That was being considered part of that.
Some other changes.
But if we keep this up, we're going to finish before 5:30. We don't need it. Move up.
We're doing that. Not every meeting is like that. Sometimes-
I want to make a comment about Measure Q for next meeting. Would it be possible to get the carryover report by department?
I'm not sure. I mean, you mean by police, fire, and pavement management, but isn't
Yeah,
it?
this was under your predecessor. This was a document that was part of the package that showed the amount of monies that were carried from one year to another. And in the initial phases of Measure Q, maybe years 4 or 5, the committee was extremely concerned about some of the departments carrying huge amounts of money over. And the theory was that citizens voted to tax themselves because they wanted the things. They didn't want the city to hoard money. And we made a big deal about that in front of the city council, and the city council ended up putting a lot of heat on the departments to actually spend the money. So it was a very informative report.
Actually, a lot of that also was related to the pavement management plan when we weren't doing it every year and they were carrying $400,000 or $500,000 a year.
Well, it was a couple million one year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I remember when I started, I think it was the year before, there was $1 million carry forward, but maybe you can look at the report we provided last year, because it is broken out by departments.
Yeah, that would be I looked at last year's report, and I saw that you have a total dollar amount, but it would be very helpful if we knew where that was.
And then, if you knew where that was.
The carryovers,
That was going to be my next point. Anything that's not spent for 18-19 sits in the fund balance and cannot be spent until it's appropriated, however this committee recommends and council chooses. So if the pavement management plan does not spend $560,000 and only spends $500,000, there's $60,000 that will feed into fund balance that's available to be appropriated anywhere.
Was that a policy change? Because that was not the way it was previously.
That's how all the other funds work. So I'm not sure if there was a policy previously, if it was just a recommendation from the committee.
No, I mean, when the question was, why do you have a $2 million balance? The Public Works Director said that they were planning a major street improvement, and they wanted to do it all at once, and they budgeted $500,000 a year for 4 years or something like that. But they took the position it was their money, and they were going to put it down on streets. And I'm just curious, is that something the Colonel changed again, or was that a?
If that was a policy, I'm not aware of it. I can tell you specifically with Measure Q, every year there are some things that are committed to already, like the debt service on the fire station.
So
it's been an ongoing commitment. But other than that, there is no determination in advance of who's getting how much funds, other than last year this committee recommended when we had our preliminary budget discussions that you wanted to see a minimum of 500,000 on pavement.
Homer, no, I remember when I presented everything. I think last year was 177,000 carryover and 40 or 50 went somewhere. And for some reason, 134 sticks in my head.
That's correct.
But that didn't, I know when I presented it, I just did the total. Here's what's left over. We recommend you do this with it. Usually, let me finish. It went to the pavement management plan last year. They wanted to do something, as I recall, with mid-year budget.
But do you remember, though, that there was carryover dollars by department?
I don't remember by individual department. I think I remember maybe that might have been by police and then fire. That's, I don't.
Okay, well, I mean, as long as there's some policy in place that it's, and the department heads know it's use it or lose it, that's fine.
Yeah, we with all of our funds, it's kind of a use it or lose it mentality, because, I mean, a couple of things, right? We don't want to encourage departments to go out and buy things just because there's money there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
However, it's not that department's money. It's general fund money specific, if that's the general fund, and it can be used for whatever the needs are and whatever the community needs at that time. So
I'll send you one of the reports.
Okay.
Okay, that would help, and if it's easy and makes sense. But you're right. You don't want the use it or lose it mentality, but on the other hand, we finance things that we don't always know what the true costs are, and that doesn't mean if that police car vehicle or safety equipment comes in under budget, that particular department, there may be some other needs that come up in the fire or somewhere else. So that, and that was last year's comment, was rather than just blanket put it in the pavement management plan, you wanted to use it at mid-year review. But anyways, send her that will be helpful. And any other comments on that? Okay, so we have the draft CAFR and the Measure Q review for our December 17th meeting. Anything else for a future agenda item anybody would like to discuss?
Yes, I'd like to make include in the agenda that, just a little preface to that. I think we need greater transparency into what all the costs are for the WRF project. An example, we talked at our last meeting trying to understand what the Corolla costs were, and from the 5.6 to the 7.3 to the 9.8 that they put in Amendment 2 to 9.9 if you add up the numbers within Amendment 2. So what I'd like to do is include in the December CFAC agenda, without the need for a staff report, an item to provide greater cost transparency by expanding Table 2, which is titled Budget Revision Summary, and show the amounts and estimates at complete for each contract. Here's a copy of that.
Is this something you bring samples forward to?
Yes, we can bring samples and share that. But,
so in other words, the staff doesn't have to do anything. We would just discuss it as a group.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
And by contracts, you mean all the suppliers?
Yeah, the things like Corolla is a contract. The city would be included as well, what the city costs, Overland, and whoever they select for the conveyance facilities and the recycle facilities, plus all the other contracts. There are about 10 other GSI and I'm trying to think of all the other names of contracts. We could roll those up because they only total less than $2 million, but it'd be good to understand what they are, because right now we bucket everything into 5 buckets, and you don't know.
So this
what's
isn't
in
to
each.
discuss it now, it's just to agendize it.
Just to get it on the agenda.
Right.
Okay, so, and you're right, we don't want to discuss it now. I guess, is that the role of this group, to go into more detail on the budget reporting? I'm not saying what you're suggesting is not appropriate. Is that the role, and is council going to support us using our resources or using staff resources to do that? Or is that something that we include in the discussion next time?
I think it's all part of the discussion next time. And a little bit of additional transparency would, in my opinion, would be good. And not talking about completely recreating the wheel. It's just maybe expanding the existing information from this much to this much.
And the city has accounts that basically align exactly with what he's talking about. So it's not like we're reinventing anything. That she has accounts, Jennifer has accounts literally for the conveyance. I mean, they're literally line up exactly, and Bill's already given an example that there's a 1.9 or something $million discrepancy between what's prior. So we've already got an example of why I think there's a concern.
Yeah, and my concern on that is reconciling between what Corolla calls the project costs versus what we call the city budget and those costs. And I'm concerned that this will blossom into more and more and more detail.
Well, that would be a very good active discussion at our next meeting. Make sense?
Okay. John, your thoughts?
As long as it's last on next month's agenda.
Won't be last.
Well, we have priorities of what our job is to do here, yeah.
Well, we're just trying to do the job. Marla described it very well. She's looking to the CFAC to alert the city council if we see they're going to overrun the budget. So if you don't understand what the numbers are, it's tough to say that, because every year or every month we get the same report saying that we're always on the budget, which we probably are. But it'd be nice to have higher confidence in that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We need to balance with the oversight we can provide without getting into the details. We have a very capable city finance staff. We have these costs are audited by auditors. We have a Corolla project engineers responsible for this. And so my concern is the resources and what it takes from our time of what CFAC is chartered to do and what the council, and the direction I've been given by our liaison. So, but I'm okay with discussing that, so I'm just not indicating I'm going to support that. But right now, we're discussing putting it on the agenda.
That's all.
That's all.
Right, because the problem is because of the Brown Act and stuff, we can't, what we're doing now is really not legal, quite frankly. We're discussing something, we shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
This is just to put something on an agenda so that we can discuss it.
I understand that.
We have to vote on that.
Well, she didn't get that, so before we vote, I want him to read it.
Include in the December CFAC agenda, without the need for a staff report, an item to provide greater cost transparency in the Table 2 budget revision summary of the quarterly report.
Table 2 WRF.
Yes,
Budget,
WRF.
yes. Mhm. And you can hand her that. WRF quarterly report, right?
Yes. Right.
Okay, so that's the item that you were moving be placed on the agenda. Second to that?
I'll second that.
All right, Homer seconded that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I've got one.
All right, so that's the third item,
Yeah.
correct? The four, you have another, and if we don't get to these next time, we don't get to them, we'll move them to January.
I would like to propose a motion that at our December meeting, we discuss a very slight expansion to the Gantt chart that is included in Section 4 of the WRF quarterly report.
I would second that if that was, I don't know, is that a motion? I guess, I didn't know we did motions for
Yeah, that's a
agenda items, but,
That's, yeah, it has to be.
yeah, I think, I mean, clearly schedule is becoming very significant. We missed the notice to proceed date, well, August 8th plus whatever. So schedule, and we've already missed the date that we weren't supposed to ever miss, and that's the extension of the cost not to exceed contract for Overland. So I think there's some very obvious reasons why having better schedule visibility makes a lot of sense, because there's direct correlation with costs and what's happening with schedule, with those two examples. Not, there's not more, but at least those two.
And again, there's no staff report. There's no, at this stage of the game, no effort at all on the staff. And when we discuss it, we may actually come up with something that would make it even less burdensome on the staff. More importantly, the outside $200 an hour consultant.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that he will not be here next month.
Right.
Yeah.
Any comments, thoughts on that?
I think that's necessary.
I'm not opposed to this suggestion. I think I'm not supporting putting it on the December. I don't think we're going to get to it.
That's okay. We just carry it to,
When you
we'll
look at
just,
the
we just
CAFR,
carry,
Well, let's
we just
let's
carry it to
discuss it.
January.
We're asking to put it on agenda. Can we vote on things to be on the agenda?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we don't get to it, we don't get to it.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor of putting it on the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, 5-0. Anything else? All right, so I think then, any closing comments from anybody? All right, sorry. Thank you again. Congrats on the awards and that. And then our next meeting will be the third Tuesday, December 17th, 3:30 here. And I'll reach out to the other members and get back to you on our action on the subcommittee. Okay, thank you.